I'm not late, you're late. Shut up, okay? Alright, so here's the deal. I gave a day one impressions of Wuthering Waves after playing it for hours on stream, and I said I was going to follow up with a 1 week video after I'd been giving it some more time. Well, it might be a little bit over a week. By a little bit over a week, I mean like a couple weeks over, okay? But I have a good reason for it. It's because I wanted to give the game enough time to breathe, and I really wanted to make sure I understood more of the combat, more of the ecosystem, and have a better grasp of the situation before I gave an update on my thoughts for it. Because I will say, I'm glad I did wait, because I definitely have developed some concerns around a couple key systems. So let's talk about them. Now, one of the things I definitely don't have a lot of concerns with is the combat. I think like other people, I initially had some concern about the combat being a little bit too easy at the beginning of the game in some of these story-based bosses. And I know people have been making the argument that, well, it's because they want to just introduce people to the game. The difficulty comes later. I still don't personally like that argument, because as somebody who got their cheeks absolutely clapped by Alpha the first time I played through Punishing Gray Raven and thought that experience was so engaging and wanting me to go through and get stronger in the game, I still think the beginning of the game can be a little bit tougher, or have at least some opportunity for scripted failure and an opportunity to clear it. I mean, I still stand by that. I'll probably die on that hill, but that's fine. That's just me. But no, later on in the game, the combat does really pick up. It is a lot better and gets quite difficult on some of the hologram stages when you're going through. And in some cases, if you are under leveled, or even if you are leveled, you're going to get 2-shot in some cases. So I will say any concerns that I had about the bosses maybe being a little bit too easy definitely is no longer a thing. I actually think, broadly speaking, the balancing of the combat is done really well. I think, like other people as well, open world exploration can be polished a little bit more in terms of a few technical bugs here and there, but that's a closed beta. And also density of the mobs in the open world definitely needs to be increased. But there is one system that I do still have some concerns about, and that is the ecosystem. Now, the ecosystem has been widely praised by a lot of other creators and commentators in this space. However, I do still have my reservations. Now, I do like that you can just pick and choose whatever echoes you want to have in each individual slot, and that it's operating off of this cost-based system. I think overall, it's going to give a lot of opportunity for building characters a little bit differently. There's a goblet equivalent in this game for those of you who've played Genshin, where you get an elemental damage bonus. And the way that this game is structured is you could have 2 of those be on a character's build, as well as still being able to pull off something with crit rate and crit damage on the 4 cost, and then still be able to fill in with some of the 1 costs. Like it just gives more variety and opportunity to play around with that. So I will say, from that high level structure perspective, I do think that's a good thing in the game. Another system I had a few concerns about was farming the echoes. We talked a little bit about on the podcast, the Rovercast. If you haven't watched that, go and check that out. A little bit about how you have the opportunity to farm the open world for echoes that doesn't require stamina, and that being great. And I do agree with that. That's a good thing, but I was concerned that that was going to become really tedious. There are a lot of systems that you first encounter in a lot of games that are at first a lot of fun, for example, the simulated universe, but then as you progress your count more and more, it becomes a little bit more of a grind just to clear it weekly so you can get the resources that you need. And I was concerned that that was going to happen with the ecosystem. I will say, with the introduction of the tacit field cleanup, a place where you can spend your stamina to just do a bit of fights in a centralized area, to be able to do that is just a much better way to do that. I think it's going to help casual players who aren't going to have time to run around and clear the entire world for all the echoes that they want to do for farming. You can burn some of your wave plates, get a few echoes, and then call it a day if you don't have a lot of time to invest in the game. But then, if you are a hardcore player, you can still farm the open world, which I do think is a great addition and something that's good to have. Now, if you haven't heard already, depending on the cost of an echo, it is going to have fixed or slightly random top stats. Like, for example, on a 1-cost echo, you're only ever going to be juggling between like an attack percent, an HP percent, and a defense percent. You're never going to get any elemental damage bonuses, but there is still an opportunity to get substats. Now, I initially liked how they were structuring the main stats, having a fixed main stat and a random main stat, still falling in a small range. And I knew that the end game grind was going to end up on these substats. The way you get these substats is as you raise an echo's level, you're then able to unlock one of these substats. Depending on the rarity of the echo is the number of substats that can be unlocked on it. And at first glance, that doesn't sound that crazy. Anybody else who's played gacha games like this before knows that the end game gear grind or artifact grind or whatever you want to call it isn't expected thing, but there's some crazy levels of RNG here that I was not aware of. If you haven't seen it yet already, I would recommend checking it out after this video, of course. But XSlice did a video breaking down some of the rough math of what it will take to get an optimal artifact piece, or an optimal echo, I should say, on your character. All of the substats that are available are listed on the screen here, more than you've seen probably in other games, like some additional ones with the inclusion of the basic and heavy attack and skills and liberation. That's the ultimate. More things that have been added that you probably haven't seen before if you're coming from a game like Genshin. On his numbers, assuming that the main skills that you're looking for are going to be the attack percent, liberation, crit rate, crit damage, energy regen, for example, which are kind of like your typical go-tos for DPS units. Obviously, it will change for other units with different kinds of scaling. You have a 0.08% chance to get all of these substats that you need. That's also not even taking into consideration that the substats that you can roll have a range. And the range is really substantial. If you want the full breakdown, it's in XSlice's video. But the problem remains the same, that the RNG level is pretty absurd. Personally, to a degree that I think is kind of a problem. Now, I know some people may brush this off and say, well, hey, use suboptimal echo pieces, and I can see that. And to be honest, I will probably end up being one of those people, but I still think the level of RNG seems pretty aggressive to get the right build on your characters. But I do think there is a way to solve this, and there's a pretty easy solution to it that some people may scoff at first glance, but I think is totally a legitimate case, and that is a substat picker. Yes, haha, laugh all you want, but look, they've done this before. For the uninitiated, building characters in Punishing Gray Raven works a little bit differently than in Wuthering Waves in that they have this memory system. The cool thing about memories in Punishing Gray Raven is that memory stats are not RNG. They are the same on every single time, no matter what method you get from getting them, buying them in the shop, or farming them in an event stage of some kind. You will always get the same substats on your memory. However, the RNG component comes into place on their resonance system, where that's when you can use duplicate memories to roll specific kinds of perks or additional substats on the memory sets themselves to make them exclusive to specific characters. Like in this case here, I've got a Crimson Slash, which is the basic attack level for Crimson Weave, as well as just getting some additional HP and attack. But there are other kinds of resonances available. It can take a lot of duplicates to get the right RNG to get the perk or resonance that you want on that character. However, PGR introduced a resonance picker. This is something that can be farmed in the game. It's not cheap, it's not easy to get, but you can get them in the game, called a memory resonance material pick. And when you use this instead of a duplicate memory, you can actually go through and choose the substat that you want to have enabled on that memory. And that can be, one of the orbs, which is like this game's skills, or some other passive stat boosts, or again, skill-based boosts. I think taking into consideration the level of RNG to get the optimal substats that you want on an echo, I think it warrants at least having some material resonance pickers or some kind of substat picker of some kind be available in the game. They don't necessarily have to be easy to get, but I think for kind of key characters, for people who want to main characters, you should be able to reasonably farm them up over time to get the echoes to the place that you want them to be. I know a lot of people think that's unreasonable, again, especially if you've come from like Genshin, for example, but it's really not. I'm a firm believer that if you want to have that artifact grind, it's there, it's available, and to get the kind of mainstay way of doing it, yes, there's going to be more RNG components to it, but I think there should still be kind of like a pity system where you can farm these pickers over time, where if you are still having a hard enough time that you can eventually start picking these substats that you want. I think it will only contribute to burnout for people if they are never getting the substats that they want on the echo pieces that you want. Like, the level of RNG to get the substats you want is just downright absurd. Now, maybe I'm overthinking this. Maybe the degree at which substats are going to affect character builds isn't actually that much, but I think it will be. And that is because skill issue is always going to be a thing. And no matter how hard some people try, I'm going to be honest, some people's skill issue is always going to be a problem. I'm not even saying that, that could be me. That could very well be me, where you kind of need a little bit of outscaling to help you along with progressing through the game. And so I think having something like that, I think is just going to help prevent burnout for a lot of players and reward players who are investing the game regularly to be able to start getting the substats that they want. That's really my only major concern at this stage. I think the story's headed in a good direction. I think the game has some bug fixes that are going to be needed, but I think those things will be polished out. Like, this is a closed beta. But I still think as much as the ecosystem is done really well, I do think that substat portion is still a big concern, and it's probably my big red flag. And I'm vocalizing these things because I want to practice what I preach here. And I've said before that speaking your mind and giving feedback to the company, now is the crucial time to do so. And so I think one of those things that is needed is some kind of substat picker to reduce that RNG just a little bit. Now, I don't know if I'm going to be playing much more Wuthering Waves in the beta because I don't want to burn myself out before the game fully drops. I think like some other content creators who vocalize this have a pretty good understanding and are ready to see the full release of the game and are ready for what it's going to be. And I find myself to be in a pretty similar spot with one little exception. Yinlin's banner just dropped in Wuthering Waves, and I really want to give her a chance. I want to try her out in the beta. I have saved some polls. We got some available left for her, but I'm gonna save these polls to do them live. If you're watching this video when it comes out, which should be the morning of March 6th for me, I'm gonna be live streaming this evening, March 6th, 2024, the year of our Lord, and we're gonna do some live polls for Yinlin. I've also got some standard polls saved up as well to see what characters we can pull out towards the end of our experience here. Hopefully we can get some new characters that we can try out really quick, experience a little bit more of their combat before we kind of just start to let Wuthering Waves lie until its final release. Or full release, I should say. So make sure to come and check out that stream. As always, thank you to all the patrons who support this channel. I greatly appreciate you and your support. And if you want to support me in the work that I do here, you can find a link to the Patreon in the description down below. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.